Well, here we are, session number 97. The title, He is Risen. And we're going to be looking today at material from all four Gospels. The first 8 to 10 verses in each, Mark 16, Mark 28, Luke 24, John 20. And hopefully our preparation last time will help us with this. I'm simply going to trace out one sequence of events that I think works. Maybe sometime along the way when we're completed, if we have the inclination, we might show more than one different sequence of events. That works. Couple questions again. What happened that third day, Resurrection Sunday? What happened at the sealed and guarded tomb? How did the 11 disciples respond to the reports of eyewitnesses who first visited the tomb? They weren't the 11. That much we do know and are confident of. Jesus rose as he prophesied, but to whom did he first appear? And second, and third. And you could go on for some time, I suspect. Now, Resurrection Sunday presents us with a number of situations and conditions we typically don't take into account when studying it. At least in the sermons that I've heard, the teaching that I've heard, quite often some of these are missing. First one, all the actors were undergoing a crisis of faith. They had thought the Messiah was coming to institute his government now, release Israel from bondage now. And so when he died, what's next? There was a crisis of faith in virtually all of the followers of Jesus Christ because of the crucifixion of the one they believed to be the Messiah, and in particular the death of the one they believed to be the Messiah. Now, resurrection was the last thing on the minds of those heading for the tomb, or not. Even those who were not heading for the tomb, resurrection had to be the last thing on their minds. The indication is everyone expected Jesus to still be in the tomb. The Jews posed an external threat to their lives because once they crucified their leader, what would happen to them? They were to be witnesses to supernatural phenomenon even beyond the resurrection. So the resurrection did not end the supernatural phenomenon. The followers were undoubtedly on an emotional as well as a spiritual roller coaster. Up one moment, down another, and right now they're down deep in the valley. We, however, stand at an emotional and spiritual distance of 2,000 years. Unlikely that we will fully appreciate the conditions and the states of those we'll be following. Now, each of the four Gospels displays a different personality, a different perspective, a different purpose, and a different audience as the author of each describes the events of that Sunday morning. That leaves the reader of those four Gospels to piece together the timing and the sequence of the day's events. So, that's where we are. And we talked a bit about that last time. But why concern oneself with reconciling the 4 accounts? Well, that's not too difficult. Showing the existence of a logically consistent sequence of events, reconciling all 4 accounts means that no one can claim to have verified that the accounts are inaccurate, in error, and nothing to be trusted. Even though they differ in their details, they still are to be trusted. And what we want to do is to show at least one sequence that verifies that it is possible to be described accurately by the 4. Mark tells us that the events began probably after sundown on the Sabbath, before anyone went to the tomb Sunday morning. For example, in Mark 16, the first half of verse 1 tells us, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought, they didn't have them. Now, Joseph and Nicodemus had 75 to 100 pounds of spices. You would have thought that had been enough, but of course the ladies watching from a distance could not tell probably whether or not they had finished the preparation of Jesus' body for the burial. So they bought extra aromatic spices so that they might go and anoint him. Now, they couldn't have bought it on the Sabbath unless there's some uncovered store open, and we have no indication that that was the truth. So sometime after 6 o'clock Saturday evening, these ladies bought and prepared spices for the next morning. They're going to go back, go to bed, assuming they didn't do this early Sunday morning, but did it later Saturday evening, and we don't really know which of the 2 times they did. All we know is this happened before any of them took off for the tomb. They purchased spices after the close of the Sabbath, and their purpose was to go to anoint him, which means they were expecting to have to finish what Joseph and Nicodemus had begun. They wanted to finish that job. Why? Because they loved Jesus who had been crucified. In no way did the women or even the men expect to encounter an empty tomb, but that's exactly what's going to happen. Was it likely in that culture that merchants opened after sundown on the Sabbath? I can't say that for sure, but they wouldn't have been open during the Sabbath, so it had to be sometime after 6 o'clock on the Sabbath or after some point of time Sunday morning. It had to be between 6 p.m. Saturday and, say, 6 p.m. Sunday morning. That is when they would have bought it. So, which of the 2 did they do? When did they buy it? We don't know for sure, but in that 12-hour gap, probably somewhere. Mary, the mother of James, in some translations, and otherwise in other translations, is she's given as the mother of James the Less, which might mean younger, might mean smaller, might mean of less influence. We don't know. And we don't know much about that particular James. This is not the brother of John. So we don't know, when they call him James the Less, we don't know really what they meant by it. James might have been, this James the Less, might have been the son of Alphaeus, and we'll see that again at one point. Perhaps a brother of Matthew and Levi. Again, we don't know, but let's not skip it. Let's go ahead and deal with it now. And in doing so, I'm going to go back to Matthew 10:3. Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax gatherer, James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and then he's going on. And in Mark 2:14, we see another connection. And as he passed by, that's Jesus, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus. So they're both James, one of the Jameses, James brothers, if you please. No, that doesn't fit. One of the Jameses, and Matthew the Levi, both names apply to one Greek, one Hebrew. Levi the son of Alphaeus, James the son of Alphaeus, both are said to be a son of Alphaeus. If that's the case, it's possible that James the Less was a brother of Matthew, the gospel writer. Well, is that key? Not particularly for what we're going to be looking at today, because most of the 11 never come into play in any meaningful way. Let me ask you another question. Do you think all the women were overnighting in the same house or in different locations? And the answer is, once more, we don't know. But surely the group of them would have made plans to include where to meet for the trip to the tomb. If they'd been scattered through the city, they would have had to have some sense of timing set up, some sense of location to meet set up, and so on. Some believe that these ladies may even have stayed in Bethany rather than in Jerusalem, because Bethany seemed to be a safe place for followers of Jesus. And of course, Jesus often stayed in Bethany also during Passion Week. Well, by the way, if they did stay in Bethany, then they had a fairly long trip to get to Jerusalem. By the way, a trip that would be too long to be a Sabbath day's journey. I don't know if that has any meaning in it or not, but if it did, there it is. If they stayed in Bethany, they would have not been able to go that position to the tomb on the Sabbath, because it was further than a Sabbath day's journey. But inside of Jerusalem, it might have been, the tomb might have been within the Sabbath day's journey. But evidently none of the ladies or the 11 or other followers went to the tomb on Saturday. The only ones that apparently went to the tomb on Saturday would have been the soldiers who were to guard it, probably led by some of the chief priests, who would have made that trip because it was within a Sabbath day's journey, apparently. Let's go to Matthew 28 and look at verses 2, 3, and 4. And this is another one that we do not know the timing. And I'll talk about what I think it means, but we'll just read what Matthew says. And he's the one who really talks about this. Suddenly there was a severe earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, came and rolled away the stone and sat on it. Now there's a that's an unusual supernatural event. And Matthew continues in verse 3, his appearance, the angels, was like lightning, bright and I guess shining, and his clothes were white as snow. Lightning startles you when it happens out of the blue. I don't think a pun was intended there. But so maybe that's what happened. When this angel showed up, it was like a streak of lightning. That would have shaken them up. And that's what verse 4 says. The guards were shaken and became like dead men. Don't know precisely what that means either. It says they became like dead men because they were so afraid of him. Translation, or not translation, opinion or interpretation, they had to see him. Otherwise, why would they have been afraid of him if they hadn't seen him? Not too hard to accept. So, how was it the earthquake that rolled the stone up? Matthew said it was the angel. But was the angel responsible in some way for the earthquake? We don't know the mechanics of this. All we know is earthquake, angel, tombstone rolled. Apparently rolled back up the incline a bit, something that would take several men to do. But one angel, but we know that some of the Gospels speak of two angels. Even two angels could have done it, even if the one did not. But Mark only says that the one that showed up at that time and scared the pants off the guards, no pun intended there, that he did it and that he was responsible. None of the four Gospels tell us of any of the women being aware of the earthquake or being startled by it. It does not come up as a declared conversation topic. The scripture doesn't mention the earthquake when the women were talking. As a matter of fact, it's a surprise to them, as we'll see, it was a surprise to them that the tombstone had been rolled back, because on the way they were worried. So if there was a earthquake that they knew about, the stone was rolled after they knew about it. But there's no indication they did. So we don't know how early Sunday morning that earthquake took place. And we assume it was Sunday morning, but we don't know for a fact either that that's true. It could have been Saturday evening, late. And I have to be careful because Saturday evening in Scripture means between 3 and 6. The 6 is the cutoff for the evening, then it becomes the next day. So when I talk about evening, I have to be careful that I'm not talking about any time after dark. The guards froze somehow, passed out. I guess if they're acting like dead men, it means they couldn't do anything, didn't do anything after seeing that angel. They did not confront the angelic being, that would be sure. One would suppose that the guards were lying on the ground. I'm assuming they passed out. Did they? I don't know that. I don't know if they had their eyes wide open and seeing everything but unable to move. When I had one concussion, the first concussion I had in this episode that I had this last year, people tell me I was seated in a wheelchair. Eyes were open. I was talking rationally, and I have zero memory of that. When I woke up in the OR, I said, "Why are we here?" I was effectively as if I were dead, even though I looked like I was totally alive, conscious, and functioning. I wasn't. I had no recollection of it. There's no mention of the guards leaving before the women arrived, only after the women left the tomb, as it discussed. There's no mention of the guards seeing the women, only the angel. If that's true, the women likely would have had to step around the guards, who apparently at some point woke up, went in Jerusalem after the women left the tomb to go back and report. So that's an interesting phenomenon, because the women are not recorded as having seen the guards either. Now, how did we know the guards were as like dead men? We don't know how that information came into our writings either. But there are several points to be made. Maybe I can make them instead of flipping on about all the stuff that could have been, would have been, should have been, so forth. The women may not have been aware that the tomb had been sealed. They may not have been aware that the guards had been placed there. Remember, that was done on Saturday, and the women did not go to the tomb on Saturday. When the women arrived at the tomb Sunday morning, then, they surely should have noticed the guards if they were still there. But we're not told that they saw any guards. So were the guards still there when they got there? We cannot say. They may have been, they may not have been. We're not told how long the angel sat on the stone, or for that matter, how long was he visible. Remember, we asked these questions yesterday. When the angel first showed up, did he stay there and visible? Did he stay there and visible, not stayed? We don't know. There's it seems that they may have been seen and not seen at different times. So it's entirely possible that they came and left, or that they came and became invisible and visible upon need. We simply do not know. Nor does Matthew tell us explicitly that there was only one angel. He talks only about one, but he didn't say whether there were more than one. And remember, if there was more than one, there was one. Often some of these guys focus on the guy who's doing the talking, who seems to be the leader if there's multiple angels. The women did not anticipate the resurrection, right? Because they were taking spices there to finish the entombing process. They probably wouldn't even have gone to the tomb at all if they had known that it was empty. So they had no idea. The angel opened the tomb to let the witnesses in, by the way, not to let Jesus out. I think that's a reasonable question. If Jesus came out after they opened the tomb, not that he needed them to open it for him to come out, but if in fact he did, that's the question. Did the guards see him leave? We do not believe that was the case. We think the guards didn't see anything helpful. However, it is possible that God's angels saw Jesus rise from the dead. They didn't, well, they didn't say they saw him, but they said, he's gone and here's what the deal is. So they knew what the situation was. Whether they saw him as he left, we do not know. It's not really critical, is it? As we will soon see, the three women mentioned so far were evidently not the only women to experience events at the tomb. As a matter of fact, if you look at all four Gospels, you can come to the conclusion that there were probably at least 5 women who were in that contingent, or at least 5 women who visited the tomb sometime Sunday morning. But how and when did the events of that morning begin? Well, let's look at Matthew 28, and we'll get that start again. Now, after the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, that's Sunday morning, near dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. So Matthew only talks about 2 of the ladies. Didn't talk about Salome. When the Sabbath was over, this is in Mark now, when Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought aromatic spices so that they might go and anoint him. We've read that one already. And that was very early on the first day of the week. At sunrise, they went to the tomb. So they could have started in dark at the moment that the dawn was about to happen. And the dawn happened sometime soon, either immediately after they left or by the time they got to the tomb. So they were not in the dark at the tomb. Luke 24:1. Now on the first day of the week, at early dawn, the women went to the tomb, taking the aromatic spices they had prepared. And John 20, verse 1. Very early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. So we so far have at least 3 names given. John speaks as if Mary Magdalene came to the tomb by herself. He doesn't say she's by herself. He just focuses on her. So that's something we're going to have to deal with, because some say she went to the tomb and included her in the list of women, not saying they went together individually. They only says they went to the tomb. We get the impression they were as a group together, not individually, but we can't verify that specifically. Matthew mentions 2 Marys, Mark adds Salome, and John mentions only Mary Magdalene. So, we got at least 3 who were going earlier. Later we'll see some reporting that Luke does that implies there may have been others too. And as a matter of fact, he gives at least 1 more name. Luke gives no names now. Later, however, let's go look at it. In Luke 24:10, it implies that there are 4 or more women may have been there. Luke 24, verse 10. This is several verses down the road after the visit to the tomb. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, there's a new name. She was Susa's wife? She was an outsider in a sense, but a follower of Jesus. Mary, the mother of James the Less, and the other women with them. So He gives us a fourth name, but said other women with them, besides Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James the Less. So he gives us three names and said plural, other women with them. His name is the fourth name that comes up, and women beyond the one he's named may mean there were at least five to get plural for the other women. And they were those who told these things to the apostles. Now, he says they were with them. Was it to report, or were they with them from the visit to the tomb to the report? So, we don't know. It could have been of at least five. Two Marys, Joanna, other women, together with Mark's Salome, were implied. Again, at least five women reported back to the 11. We're assuming it was the 11 to whom they reported after their visit visits at the tomb. It's another thing we can't pin down exactly. Were these the only followers intended to see the preparation of Jesus' body on Sunday? Where are all the men? We're not given an answer to either of those questions. We'd assume the men were holed up somewhere, or somewheres. There may have been more than one place, but we're not told. When did the women leave for the tomb? Evidently, they left very early, before dawn or at dawn, while it was still dark. The Greek words used by the authors can be translated both went and came. The saying they went to the tomb, saying they came to the tomb, really tell you the same information. Putting the four Gospels together implies that the women left pre-dawn while dark and arrived at the tomb just as the sun was rising at dawn or just after dawn. Mary Magdalene might have been an exception, meaning Mary Magdalene, according to John's version, may have gone to the tomb alone. We do not know that exactly either. As a matter of fact, we're going to assume that Mary Magdalene went with the other women initially. John's version of the events of the tomb concentrates on Mary Magdalene and may indicate that she left before the other women and arrived at the tomb before dawn while it was still dark. We do not know. And we're finding more things we don't know, and anybody trying to say there's a contradiction has to look at what he or she does not know also. The question of whether Mary Magdalene accompanied the other women is still in question. Matthew, Mark, and Luke do not say explicitly whether the women traveled in a single group, multiple groups, or even individually. Just speaks as if they were in groups, but doesn't technically say they were. Maybe Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, the language may have implied that they were together. I'm not sure. Even if the women began the journey as a single group, the authors do not explicitly state whether the women stayed with the group. All the women stayed with the group. In other words, the group never changed its makeup during the tomb experience. We don't know that either. John does not tell the reader explicitly whether Mary Magdalene went by herself or with others. As I said, it could be that that's what he's saying. We don't know. That is, even if Mary Magdalene started out for the tomb with the other women, there's no proof that she remained in their company throughout the entire tomb experience. You see how many ifs there are, and you wonder how there can be 10, 15, 20 different sequences of events. It's you don't know how many sequences there might be. Sequences. John, in fact, has Mary Magdalene apparently reporting to Peter and John with no mention of the presence of the other women. Almost no mention. And we'll look at that in a bit too. If Mary Magdalene started with the other women, there are at least two places where she might have separated from the group. One is immediately upon learning that the tomb was empty. And that's key, because that becomes a question of, did she see any of the angels at that time or not? Or she could have left that group at the time of the reporting and gone out on her own to do something else. So she did not necessarily stay with the women the whole time, even if she left with them. Here's our first assumption. We assume that Mary Magdalene began with the group and left upon seeing the empty tomb. Do we know that for a fact? No. That's where we're making our first assumption, our first opinion, if you please, our first interpretation of what we see between the four Gospels, if you please. But it is an opinion. It is not necessarily fact. So you want to take what I say with a grain of salt, because I'm showing you one logically consistent sequence of events that bring the four Gospels together without contradiction. Is it what happened actually? I do not know. And later on, I'll tell you, I don't care. That's not harsh. It sounds that way, but it isn't. Mark 16:3. They, the women, had been asking each other, this is on the way to the tomb, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? At that point, they have apparently no idea that the earthquake has happened, the angel has come, and the angel has rolled the stone back. They don't know it's rolled back. But they were pleasantly surprised when in the next verse, Mark says, but when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled back. And Luke 24, verses 2-4, the women found that the stone had been rolled away from the tomb. It wasn't just dumped, it was rolled. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. They were perplexed about this. Do you notice anything strange right now between Mark 16:4 and Luke 24:2-4? No mention of the women seeing angels. That is important, I think, because I think at this point is when Mary Magdalene had not seen an angel. If they had seen an angel, you'd think we would have heard about it, but it doesn't say they saw the angels. Let's see what John says, what his sequence looks like. And I'm going to read verse 1. Now, there are 9 or 10 verses here from John, but I'm just going to look at the first one. Now, very early on the first day of the week, that's Sunday, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been moved away. Where? From the entrance. And it doesn't say she's with anybody or not. Luke helps us out here. The women found the stone rolled away. They went into the stone and into the tomb and found it empty. They were puzzled by the absence of the body. At least to this point, there seems to have no visible angel around. That means that at least one angel appeared to roll back the stone, frighten the soldiers, and then was not visible for some period of time. It is at this point that we make our first choice concerning Mary Magdalene and the togetherness of the group. John 22. So she, Mary Magdalene, went running to Simon Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved, that would be John, and told them, "They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." What's she saying? Somebody took Jesus out of the... She's still not talking resurrection. She believes the body has been moved. So, if we put that together with Mark, we get the impression she saw no angel. There's no mention of it here. But she does use the word, "we don't know where they have put him," as if she were with other women when this occurred. So what are we doing? We're putting these things together and saying, evidently, she went with the group initially. They saw the tombstone roll back. They went into the tomb, not seeing an angel, saw that the tomb was empty. There was no body. She bolts, runs, takes off, and heads for Peter and John to report this fact. She doesn't know he is risen. Well, that's where we're going to leave matters for today. By the way, Mary Magdalene's they, who might she have thought they were? They who moved the body. Well, again, that's something we'll probably never know, but we'll see. Next time we'll be treated to the angels who appear to those women who remained at the tomb after Mary bolted and ran for Peter.